Hello, everyone. This is Johnny from Champions of Valenwood. We are a role-playing group based out of North Carolina, although we do have one member who lives in Ohio. And we are found at, as you can see up in the top left of your screen there, at Champions of Valenwood on Facebook, at champions_of_Valenwood on YouTube, or at Valenwood Heroes on Twitter. I run a 5th ed campaign, as you can see up there in the top right hand corner, called The Vanishing. This is our campaign that we have, I would say, built together over close to 10 years now. I started this campaign actually as not this campaign, but I started this world as a 4th ed world, and we played this as a 4th ed world, and then it's spilled over into when we picked up 5th ed a few years ago, and it's continued on. We had a blast playing the 4th ed world. I will put in a plug, as I always do when talking about 4th and 5th ed. We love 5th ed, but we also loved 4th ed. 4th ed was great. It was a great time. It's a different game. It's a different Dungeons and Dragons game, but overall, we thought it was great. We had fun, no regrets. It was a great game. So if you ever feel like that you were playing that game and you didn't have the fun that you wanted to out of it, well, we did, and we enjoyed it, and I would recommend it, especially if you're looking for a different type of D&D experience. But anyway, so I wanted to take a few minutes today to just talk about the campaign, some of the background pieces of the campaign, what it is about this world, and then specifically this land. If you've watched any of our episodes, which we really appreciate, and you can also find us at Twitch. We didn't put this up here because this is actually our background. We're on Twitch, but our Twitch handle is twitch.tv /Champions of Valenwood. So that's how you'll find us on Twitch, or you can just search for it. But this is our background that you would see when you come to the Twitch channel, or it's one of them. We have another one with dice too. But anyway, so you'll see that one. But this is the realm that most of the action of this campaign takes place. I'll get to that here in a few minutes. But first, I want to talk about, in general, the world that this takes place in. So, this is the world, as it says here, and the world's name is Vorla. Now, Vorla wasn't really named in our 4th ed campaign. It's only kind of been named here in the 5th ed campaign because the 4th ed campaign is centered predominantly on For All, as you see up there, kind of above the Unsunken Lands. And we'll get to that here in a few minutes. But Vorla is more recent, as I said, a 5th ed creation that I think even some of the players were like, what's the name of the world? And so I had to, figure that piece out. But this is what the world looks like, at least the known world. There's some places on here that would not be necessarily labeled. So there's some islands and things that aren't going to be labeled on here, since it's a big old world map here, a generalized world map. But you can see it's not a huge world. It's a good sized world, but not huge. And most of the action of this world in our campaign takes place in For All. So you see up there that island, continent of For All. There's been some connections to other places in the world. For instance, Josh's character comes from the continent down there to the southeast, Vadalon. Mike's character comes from the Leyden Isles, which I've not labeled on here, but they're kind of below the T there in the shallows, sort of south of For All. Then there's an island over there in the L of Elnya on the right side of your screen, and that is Jalstray, which is an island actually where Josh's previous character, Rowan, came from. And so there's some other connections to other pieces of the world as well. But predominantly, this campaign, and really both campaigns, have taken place here. So this is For All, and this is what it looks like in what's called the Third Age. The Third Age is where this campaign takes place, the 5th ed campaign. And you can see that the continent For All is dominated by the realm of, oddly enough, for all. So it's, sort of a America dominating the American continent, even though it's not truly accurate, but you kind of get the idea. So there are, what you can see here, there are, 5 traditional realms: Vorla, Garwinia, Seleas, Veleas, Agcaron, and then there's a 6th realm in the mountains there between Vorla and Garwinia, Angrus, the Dwarven realm. And so that is 6 of the realms. There's a 7th realm, which we'll come to here in a few minutes. But this is the world as it exists, or this is Vorla as it exists in the Third Age. And then where predominantly most of this campaign centers is in Agcaron, up there in the northeast. And so Agcaron is here. And this is, and I'll remove my face for a minute here. Agcaron is our background piece, but you can see it a little better here. Its capital is Emilus there, so that a large city. And then there's obviously a lot in this realm. So when we are playing this game, the campaign started in the beginning in Emilus, and from there they've been trying to figure out the cause of the Vanishing. The Vanishing is this terrible epidemic plague that affects people's memories and eventually causes them to go insane. And so they are trying to figure out exactly what is the cause of the Vanishing. And so that centered in the very first episodes in Emilus. And by the way, again, you can find all of our episodes if you want to go watch these from the beginning on our YouTube channel. So Emilus is where primarily most of this takes place. I might do another video one day with Emilus because the city is all drawn out. There's a lot of places on there and what it's about. But it's this Third Age that they're living in is an era of prosperity, and we'll come to that in one second here. And so that's what the PCs, player characters, have started in with Emilus. They've been to down the road there to close to Fentis. They've been to the Targol Swamp. They've been into the Vastwood a little bit. They've been to the Drakenels. That's been, up to this point, at least in Agcaron, the places that they have visited specifically. Now, there is another place that they are, and if you're watching right now, they are in the Underdark right now. So I'll back up one thing I said earlier. I said this is a homebrew world. It is homebrew in the sense of I've created this world, but I've taken a lot of D&D elements and added them to them. And of course, one of those specifically is the Underdark is one of those places that, obviously has its background in the Underdark, or in D&D. So there's an Underdark to this world. It figured prominently, especially at the end of the last campaign. And right now it is where they've been journeying for 10, 11, 12 episodes now. So they've been in for a while, trying to figure out some old characters have died, some new characters have come in. And like I said, we might cover some of the details of that in another episode. But so the Underdark also exists, and so there's obviously a lot to the Underdark. So this is the world this is the realm that things are happening in. This is Agcaron. Now, let's take it back a little bit, because I think that I love history, and I think that one of the things that makes any setting is the history of that setting. So I'm going to switch over here, and again, bear with me for 1 second. Get rid of that. There we go. So this is a World Anvil. World Anvil is a very cool website, worldanvil.com, where you can go and you can literally create an entire world, realms, multiple worlds, realms, whatever you want to call it. And so I have put some parts of Vorla on here. I've got a lot of work to do on this, but this is what I've done so far. And I'm going to show you specifically the timeline that I've created on here, because to me that's a piece of the world that helps explain things. So if you go to World Anvil, if you search up Vorla, you'll find it. Search box Vorla, you'll find me. And of course you'll see that there's a lot of empty stuff on there. Like I said, I've got a lot of work to do to put this on here, but in the meantime, if you're just looking for what's happened in the past, here's the timeline. So the first, and these are events related to Vorla. So this is not necessarily a Vorla timeline. This is a Vorla timeline. A Vorla timeline would require a lot more detail and finesse and things that I've never even considered yet. So maybe one day I'll get to that piece as well. But since it centers on Vorla, I thought it important to put a Vorla timeline in here. So Vorla was measured. There's a first age, which the first age, whatever the beginning was, which again goes back to time when there wasn't necessarily, but it's up to, it's been marked as the year 1000. That's an era of peace and harmony. And then it ended with something called the Reign of Tyrants. And so the Reign of Tyrants, when the Reign of Tyrants happened, this whole first age, this era of prosperity and harmony just collapsed, and civil war and all kinds of terrible things. For all, the kingdom, the realm, was at the center of all this. And so that's what For All was back in the day, if you will. When all of this was said and done, you have a second age, and For All is no longer known by the people there as For All. It's now known as the Age of Nameless Land. And specifically, it's called Nameless Lands because all those old realms has kind of died, collapsed, and so the new realms were taken over by various parties, and those parties just named the land after who was ruling it. So if it was ruled by, my name John, then they would just call it the Kingdom of John. And so it was that's what this Age of Nameless Lands, and you can see there it lasts for a good long while, 1700 plus years. So even like the oldest elves would not have lived through the entire thing. But it's an era of, as it says, war, outright war, stemming from the reign of tyrants, and then continual. It's kind of the opposite of what prosperity and peace would be. And so it was a tough time for this continent. And so there's a lot of events on here. I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here. So just bear with me here for a second. There's a lot of things here that came up in our 4th Ed campaign. So the 4th Ed campaign centered around this, but it ended with the War of Tyrants. And so the War of Tyrants was what was happening in the 4th Ed campaign that our players played. And they eventually rose to be, obviously, because if you ever made it through an entire DD campaign, you usually survived to become super powerful by the end. And so they did, and they helped bring about, I'll scroll down a little more here, the one, Adric, and put him kind of in power, and that brought about the end of the War of Tyrants. It brought about the end of the Second Age, and it brought about this Third Age, called commonly the Age of Nations. And this Age of Nations is this era of this age of prosperity. And so that is what our players are in right now. Now, if we go back a second here to, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go down here. So this is what the realm looked like in the Second Age. So this is what it looked like during the Age of Nameless Lands, during the War of Tyrants. So this is what it looked like in the last couple years of that age. This is what the world looked like during that campaign. And so again, so you have Garwin's realm, Darren's realm, Varric's realm, the 7 lords, Agron, Lashram, and Seneca. So you have 7 realms here during this time, and this was, like as I said, it was a rough period. There was a lot of war, a lot of civil war. Ultimately, there was a huge undead invasion, and that was kind of the centerpiece of the campaign. It's kind of plopped right into the middle of that whole War of Tyrants thing, and it eventually centered around an artifact called the Crown of Tyrants. And so that was the thing that the party, the players were trying to both find, put together, get to Adric, and then Adric had to rise to power amidst all of this, stop the invasion of undead, stop the warring, and yeah, it's a great campaign. Like I said, we had a blast. When it was all said and done, this is the Third Age, and Year of the Dragon, year 1, and then you see Adric there, died in 63. By the time he's died, peace is ruling across the land. The Covenant of 7 Nations rules again. I'll come to what that 7th nation is in a second, because I mentioned there were 6 earlier in the Third Age, and there's a 7th. But so the Covenant of 7 Nations is there, and so for the first 260 years, as you can say here, of this age, there is very little strife, very little war, no open scale warfare. I mean, there's obviously some little skirmishes or bandits or things like that are normal but for the most part, it's an era of peace. It's broken a little bit by this Carrion's conquest, which has come up in our campaign a little bit. But eventually we get to 313 Age of Nations, which is when this vanishing epidemic begins. And the next year is 314, and that is the year we're actually in right now, 314 of the Age of Nations. So the vanishing's been happening for about a year, and it's the thing that our heroes are trying to solve. And so that's what the world and the land looks like, and a little bit of the history of this Vorla. Now, if we come back to the nations, I'm going to scroll back up to this one. So we said that there were 6 realms in Vorla, which there are. There's a 7th realm, and you see up there the encircling seas, and you can see those islands. So those islands actually make up a 7th realm, because during the War of Tyrants in the Second Age, those people called the Wanderers invaded as well. And so it was up to Adric to diplomatically I guess there was some manipulation, but diplomatically deal with them and to bring them in onto an alliance, which eventually it happened. And then from there, their help to, put an end to the War of Tyrants. And so when that was all said and done, they of course wanted in on this prosperity and want to be as seen as equals. And so those groups of people in the encircling seas, those islands kind of function as one, even though they're ruled by different people, but they kind of function as one group. And so that's the 7th realm. So there's seven nations there. You have Garwinia, Angris, the realm of the dwarves, Feral, the biggest, the centerpiece, most powerful, Seleas, Veleas, and then Agharon, and then of course the realms of the encircling seas. Agharon, if you picked up on this, in the Second Age was also named Agharon because that was the ruler, and they were so happy with his rule that he was deemed a hero, and so they named the realm after Agharon. We might get into that in another episode about, was he really that heroic, or did he just benefit from some super powerful PCs coming and saving his realm? Talk about that later. But that's Agharon's realm. And you also notice that Garwinia, it was Garwin's realm during that time. Garwinia also named for the wise king Garwin. He was a wise king, and so that's what it's named for. Other realms did change names, but ultimately this is what it looks like here in 314 of the Age of Nations, the Third Age. So, that is where we're at here when the campaign has started, and now through, like I said, we're 30-something episodes into it, and so they are delving deep into this mystery of the vanishing. So, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to put in one more plug here. These maps, this map here specifically, was made at incarnate.com. I don't know if you've ever used Incarnate, but they're a pretty cool site. It makes some much sweeter maps than my hand-drawn maps. So those are cool, and I like to use that site to make up these awesome-looking maps. So that's what these maps here are from. So if you this gives you, I just wanted to give, like I said, a little background. I'm going to do some more of these where I talk more about specific campaign-related materials, the characters, what's driving them, some of the mysteries behind the vanishing, some of the mysteries behind some prophecy, because there's a whole lot of prophecy. I'm a huge believer in prophecy. I love it. But I hope you enjoyed this. And like I said, please check us out at twitch.tv /Champions of Valenwood, or I'm going to take you back here to the Apologize for scrolling through screens. Still not very good at the old technology thing yet, but if you, like I said, at Champions of Valenwood on Facebook, Champions _of _Valenwood for YouTube, and then at Valenwood Heroes on Twitter, where I update and put a lot of these things out there. So thanks for watching this. Thanks for joining us, and I hope that you enjoy it, as I said, and I hope that things go well for you, and I'll see you next time.